Hello, everybody. And after last week's screening of ToryBoy The Movie, we've been very lucky to be joined by the star, director, and all-round good guy of politics, John Walsh, who is going to talk us through some of the motivations behind the movie, I guess, and answer some of the questions that you had for him.
Neil, great to be here, and I appreciate you showing the film to your students because you saw it a few years ago when it was on its cinema run. I don't know if it was the first or second cinema run, but it had a couple of runs. So I met you. I think it was in Aberdeen.
It was indeed, yeah, many years ago when I was a much younger man as well. And as I said at the time, the movie shocked me for the way it shone. Give it a spotlight into the inner workings of politics. And when I've been kind of doing some of the work with the class over the last week while, I just kept remembering everything that you went through on that struggle to try and get elected and what you were fighting against. And I couldn't think of a better movie to show them, to show how politics actually works.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, lockdown. What a treat to see a bit of what might on the surface seem like a bit of political propaganda and maybe Tory propaganda, all those of all things. So I wonder how many of you watch this thinking, oh God, what am I watching here? 2 hours of party political broadcast. But for those of you stuck with it to the end, I think you realise it wasn't that at all. Well, at least I hope it wasn't for you.
No, and as you saw by some of the reviews, I think everybody quite enjoyed certainly the humour you brought to the topic. You've done a lot better job than I can do in the classroom. They've absolutely got sick of my voice over this lockdown, so you're a welcome change.
No problem. Well, my apologies in advance for the bad language. That it's not funny, it's not clever to be effing and jeffing, and so apologies if anyone was offended by that. But lets the mask slip a bit, I think, doesn't it?
The frying pan incident is going to remain in my memory for a long time, anyway.
Well, I'll get onto that because that's part of trying to separate myself from the subject, because outside of politics, I'm actually a filmmaker, and I was a filmmaker throughout, and I remain a filmmaker. So there's a certain sort of ethical code, if you can believe it, that filmmakers have.
So it sounds brilliant. So will we kick things off with one of the questions that we've got from the students? The first one I've got for you is, did you remain in politics? And if so, what did you do the same or differently from that 2010 election?
Well, I think, did I remain in politics officially as a candidate and sort of a conservative? The answer is no. and the main reason for that is because once the election was finished, you have to kind of reapply to go back on the candidates list. And the rules slightly changed with the Conservatives. So they said that people on the candidates lists have to be sort of regularly and actively seeking a candidacy in a constituency. I went back to doing lots of TV work, so I couldn't commit that kind of time to it. And I kind of thought, I'm not sure they'd want me when they see the film. And to my surprise, they did. And when the 2015 election came up, because this one was in 2010, excuse me, just take some more, sir. Classic kind of politicians delaying tactic there, trying to answer a question, but genuinely it's hot down in London. So when the film followed the 2010 election, the film was released in 2011. When there was another election then in 2015, and I hadn't been on the candidates list since 2010, I was asked by Boris Johnson, of all people, would I return? He was Mayor of London at the time and he'd seen the film. He sent me this lovely letter. Of course, he's our Prime Minister today. And I was really flattered to be asked. And you kind of think, has anyone seen the film? Because, no one comes out with any glory from that film, myself included. You hear the phrase burning bridges. Well, these bridges just went up in flames, with potential people who you could have aligned with. But I am still in politics in the sense I've always been interested in politics, and I always will be. And I'm a bit of what's called a news junkie, what the Americans call. I watch a lot of news, and some people are very turned off by elections, and the American election is coming up. I'm very excited by that, and I watch a lot of American news. And not because I'm a fan of Trump or because I'm a fan of Joe Biden. I'm not a fan of either, actually. But I'm a fan of the mechanics of it, the process. I think that's why I'm always interested in politics. And for me, it's the machine of how it works. And for all of the films I've made for television and for cinema, the one thing they all have in common. It's about getting that toy, breaking it open, seeing how the parts work, seeing if you can put it back differently and make it work more efficiently. And that's what I've been doing for despite my youthful complexion, for nearly 25 years. So it's no, I'm not actively in politics, and I'm not seeking a seat. I hope this isn't arrogant, but I think I could get a candidacy in a seat. Whether I'd win it or not, I'm not sure. But this breaking down of what's called the Red Wall in the north of England, other people have told me, and I'm happy to take it, that I started it with ToryBoy the Movie, because these small cracks led to the entire Red Wall being broken down. So yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there and see, is that kind of a point of pride that you've managed to overcome some of these historic sort of voting patterns, and as you see, maybe make a couple of cracks and even get Boris Johnson on side? Who'd have thought that?
Well, I think because of the nature of the film, and I did it independently and on my own, they could probably see that I would be an asset to have in any seat. And I'm somebody who can deliver a product and get a message out. You know, politics is about two things. It's about being in charge and running things as they are, but explaining to people in a way that they find palatable why you're doing what you're doing. And this is whether you're putting taxes up or shutting bridges, or we've had this big lockdown. So the challenge is, how do you tell people, some of whom who don't like what you're saying anyway, how can you explain what's happening? So what's called the message, and how to I hate to use marketing terms, but branding, but it is about branding. If you can brand the party correctly and have a clear message, you're more likely to win votes than those who aren't. So the most interesting political stories are the failures. You know, why did the Labour Party fail so spectacularly is a much more interesting read than why did the Conservatives do so well. It's less interesting. So no, I am fascinated by that. Did that answer the question?
In typical politician style.
Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, no, I do take pride in you know, having an effect on people, because if Labour had been in Middlesbrough for that long, and it was voted one of the worst places to live in the UK, a common factor is Labour. Yeah. So if it had been Lib Dem or Conservatives there for 40 or 50 years, and it was a terrible place to live, then that would be a common factor as well. People in the town didn't like the Labour Party sufficiently that Stuart Bell's majority was whittled down. As a person, people didn't like him personally. When people saw me, they liked me. And the most ringing endorsement I got, which was a backhanded compliment in some ways, was, "Oh, John, we like you very much. It's a shame you're not in the Labour Party." I don't know where that voice came from, but it's an amalgam of people I met. But older people would say, "Oh, why can't you be Labour?" And I was like, well, you've got a candidate. You've got an actual constituency MP. So I can't be the Labour candidate when you've got a sitting MP. But I fitted much more the profile because I'm working class. I came from a Catholic background. I fitted in quite well, despite kind of coming up from London rather cheekily and arrogantly. But I wasn't handed that seat. I won it. You know, there was other local people who were much more qualified in local politics. But I played my disadvantage to my advantage, as I've often done in television. And the takeaway, that even if you don't like me and you don't like what I've done, the takeaway to get from today is, if you have a disadvantage and you're in a room full of people who have an advantage, you can sometimes separate yourself from them and turn it to your advantage. So there was 8 other candidates there in Middlesbrough. I had an interview in Redcar that afternoon, and I was there with John, my glamorous assistant, who you'd have seen in the film. And we were planning which fish and chip shops to go to. He was looking on his phone to see what would be opened and planning the rest of our day, not expecting that I'd be offered Middlesbrough. The other candidates were exceptional. Former political researchers that had worked for MPs, councillors, former councillors and current councillors from the area, from that town. So they knew that town. They knew how to spell it correctly. So I kind of thought, well, how am I going to turn that to my advantage? How can I make the fact I'm a cheeky lad from London who works in TV, of all things, who's never been employed, interestingly, you know, I'm outside of so many people's expectations of their own life. So how will I reflect their own lives? I said to him, look, you've got other people here. You've done that before. every time you've put a candidate up, a Conservative candidate up, you've got a local person who's got good local knowledge, who's known locally. It hasn't worked. You've still got Stuart Bell. I'm from London. I'm in television, and I can make video leaflets. I made a video leaflet called the Bell End Campaign, which was a little 4-minute film that was picked up by Guido Fawkes, who's the Conservative blogger at the time, and it created like a lot of interesting heats, and it was like a little comedy short about how Stuart Bell's never here, he's always in Paris. And when I pitched to them in that meeting, apparently, because I wasn't there for the vote, unanimously they voted for me, and none of the other candidates had any kind of, had mostly an even split between members. So I was amazed. You know, I was pretty shocked on screen, where you can see I was pretty shocked. That's genuine. And part of me was thinking, oh, what have I just walked myself into? And then as the election went on, oops, what for here for 5 years? You know, that'll teach me. But no, on the serious note, I would have done it. And John, my assistant John, was looking for houses for us in the town. He was researching how much a parliamentary chief of staff would get. He was even deciding what suit he would wear. So, you know, it was interesting. It was interesting.
That reminds me of one of my other favourite parts is once you found out you had got the nomination and you called your mum and got a little bit emotional about it. That really kind of sucked me into the story early on, and I thought it was a really, really nice part. But also when you were answering there and you were saying, oh, it's a shame you weren't Labour. And knowing that you're kind of from a background in which your family were Labour supporters, in the time since running as a Conservative candidate, have you ever differed again and thought about going back to Labour, or are you very much a Conservative now?
I think I was probably always Conservative anyway, with a small c, as they say. And that means, you know, when you run your own business, I have done that for years. I've been less sympathetic to the way Labour runs things. It's a bit of a pick and mix, you know, which party has everything that you like, please tick here. Well, none of them do. So it's a case of finding the one that has the most policies you perhaps agree with. Did I agree on the war in Iraq with Labour? No. Did I agree on some of the other things they brought in about salaries for poorer people and family credit? Yes. It's that old saying, it's better the devil you know. But an interesting, and this isn't sidestepping your question, I think this is really relevant. How I got turned on to the Conservatives was I was working with the Labour Party. I was making a documentary with Gordon Brown in Number 10. And Labour Party, well, at that time, it was in the last sort of 18 months of Gordon Brown's premiership. They weren't nice people. They weren't nice people. Conservatives were nice people. Throughout all of the election and everything that happened, I didn't have any problems with the Conservatives, and probably they saw me more like one of them. But Labour lot, they weren't nice. And the stories I heard about Labour Party in Middlesbrough and the way they operated and the way they spoke to people and treated people who had problems, not nice. You know, this acceptance that we're going to be here forever because it's a Labour stronghold. So whatever your problem is, we've paid lip service to it. You know, jog on if you want to get a solicitor now to take it to the next level. So there was in towns where there's an entrenched candidate who's kind of there regardless of the work they do, then you know, the motivation's gone, isn't it? I mean, if you think in your work, Neil, you know, you're an excellent teacher. I'm an award-winning filmmaker and author. Thank you very much. No applause, please, until the end. So if I wasn't, you know, I'd soon be bounced out of it. There's other people who want to work in TV or have books published and so on. So we have to work at what we're doing. And, you know, being an MP is one of those unique positions, and this goes across all parties, where you don't really have to try that hard. Once you're in, you're kind of, it's potentially a kind of a job for life. And when I did the radio rounds after the film came out, I was regularly on the radio, people would say, well, Dan, you know, John, this is really unfair, you know. And I said, well, look, hang on. If you're a member of the civil service and you're having to work with MPs, then you have to stick to human resources codes, and there's a kind of a contract of work for you. You can't be late and so on. You can't turn up scruffy. An MP across any party only has to do two things when they're elected. The first is to attend Parliament once in a parliamentary term. That means sitting in the House of Commons. And the second thing, doesn't have to be in this order, is to give what's called your maiden speech, your first standing up on your feet, talking about often your constituency. Well, you could do both of those in one afternoon and head back to, in this case, Middlesbrough, put your feet up. Who's going to know? Local paper? No one reads that in London.
You're right. Sounds like a cushy job for 5 years if you're someone like Stuart Bell.
Well, you know, and he had it 30 years. 30 years good.
Amazing. Okay, so we'll go back to another question from a student, and you kind of started talking about it there, so I think it's a nice wee intro to it. What did you do after you lost the election?
This is when I read that question, I smiled to myself because these are great questions, by the way. As much as I did lose the election, there's no question of that. You saw it on the film. I won the argument. I came away that night. My parents were up there as well. And I came away that night strangely relieved it was over. John, my assistant, took it quite badly because he thought that we should have won and that we gave the better argument. So anyway, I come back to London and I'm sort of happy enough. And you can see us at the end of the film having an ice cream. And John took it quite badly. He sort of felt that we'd been robbed and, and I said, well, hang on, look. We've got 72 hours of footage. We'll cut it together. There'll be a great film. And he kind of thought, well, I don't think there will be because he was up there. Nothing much happened. And sometimes you can be too close to a subject to realize, what you've got. Mm-hmm. And this originally was going to be 2 10-minute films for Channel 4 News. And it was going to show the life of a candidate, what it's like, particularly moving from London and switching teams, as it were, from Labour to Conservative. Anyway, came back, cut it together and found it was a different story entirely. I didn't plan the Stuart Bell story. That kind of unwrapped in front of me. So fast forward a year later to the day of the election. So was it May the 8th, 2011, the film premiered. It's a great success. It was in cinemas and so on. But I never felt that I'd lost the election. I kind of thought I'd stole the story because it was common knowledge in Middlesbrough what he was up to. But as a filmmaker, I was like, this is great. No one's got this story. None of the press have cottoned onto it. And I was hoping I could keep a lid on it until I released the film. So if anyone remembers the end of the first Rocky film, the boxing film with Sylvester Stallone from the early 70s, spoiler alert, he doesn't win in the first film. He loses. And he goes all the way to play the world's heavyweight champion of the world, Apollo Creed. But he gets his chance, and he's a guy from a broken family, and he really does well, and he gets right to the end and he nearly wins, but he doesn't. And yet it's perceived to be a success because he won as it were the moral victory because he didn't have all the money behind him. So I saw myself as that. I mean, as arrogant as it is to say, you have to have there is a certain percentage of arrogance in someone who wants to be a filmmaker and put themselves in front of a camera and so on, and be a politician. So I saw it as, if I'd won, that film would not really have worked quite as well. The reactions I got in cinemas, and we were nominated for a Grierson Award, which is like the leading documentary award for the UK. Had I won, I went up and done my little victory speech and said, I'll see you all in Parliament. And then fast forward to me in Parliament, standing up doing my maiden speech. You would have thought like, okay, well, yeah, I guess he won because the other guy wasn't any good and time for a change and, he's a Tory, whatever. The fact I didn't win and that little confrontation with Bell at the end, there's a story behind that as well that you don't see on camera. This film could have been like much, much, much longer. And I was just like thinking to myself, when I saw John later, I think, God, I hope he got all that in focus and he got the sound on that. Because that confrontation at the end that nearly came to blows. So Stuart Bell thought he was speaking to the radio, and he was speaking to a lady from the radio, had a radio microphone, and it said something like T's radio on the microphone. I was wearing a radio mic here, just under my suit, and listening to it was John, my assistant. I said to John on the way in, and by the way, this isn't me being a sneaky politician. This is me being a sneaky TV person. I said, when we go into the election hall, and we had permission to have a camera in there, I'd spent 2 previous months getting that permission from the returning officer, who's the person in charge of what's called the count, the physical count. So we had a license to be there. I said to John, when we go in there, stay away from me. Don't come anywhere near me. And I said the same to the people who are my volunteers. I said, look, just stay, don't come anywhere near me, because I don't want anyone to know you guys are with me at this point. My parents were there, so I was mixing with them and the other party workers. So John stayed well clear. Anyway, Sir Stuart Bell was giving his acceptance speech, and he got virtually no applause in a Labour town. Interesting. Then he went and spoke to the lady from the radio and was saying how he's won for a 7th time and how well he's done. And he started to say how terrible the Conservative candidate, I was. I was thinking, oh, okay. I said, John, get yourself over here right now. So he aligned himself right next to the girl from the radio. So Bell is giving it all that, thinking he's speaking to Tees television, I guess, because there's the guy with the girl. Oh, despicable Conservative Party, or having his right of reply, which you could argue he's entitled to do. When he found out that was filmed, because later on his son comes up and offers an expletive, and it becomes a bit of an argy-bargy, if you will. He didn't like that, so he contacted the journalist and said, "Oh, I'd like to have that footage, please." Doing a Stuart Bell impression. Might as well. He said worse about me. And Tees Television were like, Tees Radio, sorry, were like, you mean the recording? Yes. I don't want that being shown of my son doing this, doing that. They said, oh, no, we won't. So he said, well, where is the footage? I want the footage. And they were like, beg pardon? Footage, where's the footage? And they were like, there was no camera there. He was like, well, there was a camera. Anyway, it goes back and forth. Then he finds out, no. So when the penny eventually dropped, he goes to the returning officer to find out how it was I was given permission to have a camera in there. And he did his utmost, apparently, but not enough for me to include it in the film, to try and get hold of things. I mean, the interesting thing about Sir Stuart Bell, he didn't come after me at all in the town. He did go after other candidates. Interesting. So he's a wily old fox.
I would say the try to track down the footage is the hardest he's worked in many years. So maybe you got something out of him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only up there for a brief amount of time, for about 9 months in total. And what I saw, he wasn't doing much. But what we can't tell is maybe when he started in those first few years, maybe he was working very hard. And, even I say in the film, I want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, because as the filmmaker, I'm trying to make sure that it's kind of even-handed.
Brilliant. And did you ever manage to get in touch with Stuart Bell after the election? I know you just mentioned there that he's trying to get hold of the footage. But if so, did Stuart Bell ever give you an explanation for his absence?
No, he didn't. But, so that the film isn't one-sided, I was very keen to do a film about politics, and I thought about filming a candidate. And when David Cameron said he'd make it so that anyone could apply, I thought, well, I'll give that a go and I'll see if I can apply. But I quite wanted to film a candidate in a town just so I could follow the mechanics of it. But no candidate would have given me the kind of access I would have given myself. But once I realised it was going to be me, when I got the footage back, I viewed it as if I was a separate person. So warts and all, it went in there, the bad language, everything else, because I thought that's interesting and it's gone wrong. Let's see how that goes wrong. When it finished, I was keen that we didn't have a kind of a proper appraisal from Stuart Bell, because he hasn't seen what we've had to, if you like, accuse him of or offer up about him. So what was really interesting, and it was quite a relief actually, local newspaper was following what I was doing, and they followed up with 100 phone calls to his constituency telephone number during office hours over 100 separate days at different times of the day, but always in office hours between 9 and 5 p.m, and left messages for him. And he never returned any of those 100 phone calls. So that helped solidify, if you like, the accusation I was making that he wasn't doing the job he was being paid for. His lounge in his house was being used as a constituency office, but nobody ever visited it. And his wife, Lady Margaret, was his constituency secretary, for which the taxpayer was paying her, and yet she wasn't available to constituents. That's not to say other work wasn't happening, but that much I do know. So he got a right of reply in the papers, and then local BBC News, Look Northeast, I think it was called, actually did a whole thing because we had a premiere in the town just to rub, sea salt into the wound. We had a premiere in Middlesbrough in the Cineplex or the Cineworld up there, and it was included in the local news report. ITV, Tyne Tees News covered this as well, and it was just like covering any film premiere because there was a local aspect to it as well. And they did track down Sir Stuart Bell himself to get a right of reply, and his right of reply was, "Oh, I don't know what they're saying about me, but they said, well, they're calling you Britain's laziest MP, Sir Stuart. How do you think you feel about that?" "Oh, well, I don't think it looked very good on my tombstone." He was dead 12 months later.
God. That's, it's a shame we never got a proper reply from him, and kind of trying to explain why he never wasn't doing his surgeries, wasn't given the job is full attention. Maybe, like you say, Paris is too attractive and he prefer to spend his time eating crepes over there.
Well, look, we did a film. We did a film called ToryBoy The Aftermath. You can just see it there behind me. So I can make that link available to everyone who's seen it. It's who's seen the film online. And it's basically it's a little 10-minute after film. I'm not in it. There's a little bit of voiceover for me, but different politicians and Sir Stuart Bell get a proper right of reply, and you can see those news reports. And you can make up your own mind because, there's some criticisms of me in that as well. And I was kind of trying to be as neutral as possible. I was keen. Anyone who had something negative to say about me as a candidate, it went straight into the film. There was a few people where we're sending out leaflets who said I wouldn't vote for you under any circumstances, to some effect. And there was a lovely Northern Irish lady who, after a hustings at a church, said, "Oh, I think you're a wonderful candidate, but I wish you weren't part of the Unionist Party." And that was wonderful. I was delighted to pop that in because I don't want this to be a love letter to me and my project. You want the criticism. It makes it a far more interesting program. But ToryBoy The Aftermath will be available with this video. I'll give you the link for it, and have a look and just see then if that confirms your view of the film or makes you think about something differently. But the local newspaper there, the Northern Echo, I think it was, or was it the Middlesbrough Gazette? They're a Labour-leaning paper. So I'm back in London. I'm back doing TV stuff. I'm all good. They're up there having to have Stuart Bell for a 7th term. So good luck with that. So that's why they went after him. It's not because media people have this secret handshake because you're from the telly, I'm from the paper. No. They wanted to test, if you like, the accusation I was making. And Stuart Bell really should have, if I was him, I would have upped my game and answered all calls and said, "Look, John Walsh is wrong. I may have missed a few calls, but he should be up here dealing with these issues instead of being in his ivory tower in TV land." He did something which was quite clever in one way. He kept quiet, and by keeping quiet for 30 odd years, he managed to avoid any scrutiny, and I think that was the key to his survival.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of the questions you've kind of just answered there about him never answering the phone call. But as you were saying with the media there, maybe your speech, I think it was at the church hustings as well, where you promised to get Stuart Bell in jail within the next year. But maybe it was that statement that got the Middlesbrough Gazette or whoever it was on board.
I think so. Look, there was the thing about what I was really cross about that because, again, I'm up there and I can do pretty much what I'd like because I'm successful. I've chosen to be a candidate. It hasn't chosen me. I've chosen this. And similarly with the work I do in film and television now, I choose my work. The work doesn't choose me. So I'm fine about being up there. And, fine if I win, don't win, whatever. And I funded it out of my own pocket. So there we are at the hustings at the church. All of the other candidates are there. The Liberal Party had somebody. There was the independent candidate from the town. There was the Greens and so on, other people. Everyone was there. The date for that hustings was organised around Stuart Bell's diary. So it was fixed particularly around the date he would be available. And of course, he did a classic thing of just saying at the last minute, "I'm not doing it," and gave no real reason. And the people there were very upset that somebody from the council was a stand-in. And Barry Gardner, who I think is a police commissioner now, he was sneering up there like, "Yeah, well, whatever. There's only a handful of people here. It won't really get reported." Well, I made sure it did get reported. Had I become the MP, I might have had a job getting him into prison, but I'd have given it a fair go, and it got a round of applause. So in a sense, I won the argument, and had that been broadcast on the news, then somebody might have brought me to book and said, well, how do you expect to get him into a courtroom when it's not in fact illegal not to answer your phone and not to be? I said, well, it might not be illegal, but it should be. And so, there is a way of winning the sound bites. And, most people agree, at least he shouldn't be doing the job and taking the money. You could probably throw a stone in the street and hit somebody who'd do a better job. But yeah, the hustings, that was interesting.
Yeah, maybe you can get your friend Roger Moore to back you up and making it illegal. Again, another question here. Would you ever run for MP again?
Ooh, I get asked that a lot. And the reason I would say probably not was I already took this apart and saw how it worked and put it back together. And the unexpected bonus was that there was another story inside. The story of me being a candidate wouldn't have lasted for 100 minutes. It would have been 2 10-minute films for Channel 4. But had I gone to Redcar next door and been selected there was none of this kind of scandal with the Labour Party. There was a Labour candidate there who worked quite hard, was liked by some and not by others. So I kind of lucked out there and got something really nice. So would I do it again, and would I do it without filming it? Gosh, that's too hard to say, because I'm a filmmaker before I'm anything else. So I'm always thinking, is there a film in this? Or now, is there a book in this? No, at the moment, I don't see it. But if I was asked to follow a campaign, I'd be interested. I've tried to film different political ventures at different times. And politics, I think, is more heated now than ever. So I think there is still some exciting stories to be found, but politicians are rightly quite guarded. They want you to report the successes, not the failures. And that's partly why people don't trust people in politics. But who of you in this class watching this will be quite happy for your worst homework reports to be pinned up on the board for everyone to have a sneer at? So it is that, in the professional world, you don't want your failures kind of trumpeted. But no, at the moment, no plans. No plans. You'd vote for me though, Neil, I'm sure.
100%. You've always got my vote, John.
Excellent.
I might even come out campaigning for you.
Excellent. Well, I'll hold you to that, because I had like a Pied Piper effect. I scooped up other people who were campaigning for Paul Bristow in the seats next door, and Paul is now an MP. I think he's the MP for Peterborough, so well done, he finally got there. But they weren't so keen because it wasn't that much fun. So I stole them over, and it's like a Pied Piper effect. So I had all these lads following me and coming to my hustings and watching me do stuff with online videos and so on. It was a bit more exciting. Yeah,
they were actually really good. I love the fact that they looked as though they were having so much fun out with the megaphone, and I thought I added such a nice touch to your campaign. And I guess it kind of ties in. How frustrating was it spending so much of your time campaigning for Bristol rather than being able to focus on your own patch and really go at it from Middlesbrough?
I didn't mind, because again, it was that part of it. That's part of the mechanics of it. If you're not in a target seat, and Paul was in a target seat, so he was expected to win, and he received money from a fund that Lord Michael Ashcroft, who was the co-chairman of the Conservative Party, actually put together. So he was obliged, as it were, to work hard and do leafleting and so on. I was happy enough. John, who worked with me, wasn't, as you can tell from the video. He thought it was a waste of time because it doesn't help us. It didn't help us per se, but it gave me a more sort of rounded view. But when I spoke to Paul's agent, who was quite a kind of a seasoned political agent, he said to me, for goodness sake, John, why didn't you apply here first? I would have taken your hands down over Bristol. And he said it in earshot of Paul, So I was like, had I been in that seat, I probably would have won it, because the swing I had in Middlesbrough was enough. I could have taken Middlesbrough South. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, I didn't mind, because for me, again, it was seeing more of that machine, because I think people were surprised. Really? You got to go and do that? Yeah. That's not good use of your time. Couldn't they find someone else? And it was, no, that's fine. We had the time, we were up there. So it seemed odd, but I was fine about it. And I like Paul, and I wish him the best of luck.
Mm-hmm. When John's girlfriend came up as well, and she was speaking about our campaigning for Bristol gravy instead of actually doing the work. It was, again, as you say, it really shone a light into how politics works, and it's not just you work hard and the right person gets elected.
No, and even with being a candidate, it was true. I had no contacts in the party. I didn't sort of pick up a magic TV celebrity phone and say, get me in there because I'm going to do a film about it. No, 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 it was none of that. You know, I had no contacts. I got in there simply on my own merits and turning my weaknesses into a strength and so on. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Again, you've sort of answered this question as well, but there's maybe something you want to add. What inspired you to do this and compete for the Conservative Party? Was it purely for seeing the TV angle in there, seeing that you can make a movie out of this, or is there more that you had?
Well, I've been on Breakfast News. If you look on my website, johnwalshfilmmaker.com, you'll see under public speaking me on Breakfast News talking about a series called Sofa Surfers I made, I think, in 2009. So it was a 5-part homeless series for the BBC. And I think I met after that some young Conservative people in the green room who were talking about David Cameron's announcement at lunchtime about anyone joining the party. And that kind of pricked my interest. And I thought, what, anyone? Even someone like me? And I kind of did it to put it to the test more than anything. But I did like what David Cameron was doing at the time. This is at a time when Gordon Brown was failing around in number 10. And I think doing quite a bad job. I mean, I think his intentions were certainly honourable and he intended doing a good job, but he didn't. He did the opposite of a good job. And, you know, David Cameron was looking more attractive because it's easier to sell something new and shiny than it is to, say, stick with the same old battered horse in the race. So I kind of put it to the test, but I liked the Conservatives when I met them and they treated me well. And I mean, that's quite intoxicating. You've been treated really badly by the Labour Party. And it was really quite appalling, the whole experience I had with the documentary with Gordon Brown. You know, maybe that's another book or another documentary, but wow, that was a busted flush, to put it nicely.
Mm-hmm. I'd be interested in watching that film or reading that book, because getting a spotlight into how politics works, and certainly somebody you think once he's made it to number 10, he's the Prime Minister of the country, you've got the idea that he'd be quite efficient, doing the job well, and no, that'd be really interesting.
Well, I think to be fair to Gordon Brown and to any Prime Minister taking over, you have all these great plans of what I do. It's a bit like if somebody said to you, if you won the lottery, what would you spend the money on? But then when you get the lottery money, you find most of it's already allocated. It's like, oh, but I was going to buy a house. No, there's a house already, you can get into that. But I was going to get a car. Well, there's a bus here, you can drive that. Politics is about imagining a future that doesn't really exist except in your mind, but trying to sell it to people as if it could. Because to actually be a successful politician, you need as little democracy as possible, because you need people to sort of not get in the way every 3, 4, or 5 years. Because if you've got a big spending plan, sometimes you won't see the fruits of that until sort of 10, 15 years later. But every 3 to 5 years, you have to have this kind of struggle with the electorate to try and stay in power. So there's a short-termism, and you know, it affects all political democracies where you can't get much done because you're always thinking about 3 to 5 years. And if there's big deals already in place and lots of people already have your money spent for the 4 or 5 years you're in power, then what do you do? What do you say to people? I just promised them loads at Christmas. I said, when I become Prime Minister, we're going to pull all these levers. Now I discovered that not only is there no money, there's no levers.
I know, that's again, it's so interesting to see how politics really works. For a lot of the students here, this is the first time that they've actually got to look at how the country's run and what democracy is really like. And again, going into one of the questions is, do you think there's a problem in the voting system, or do you think there's more of a problem with people voting for the party the MP represents rather than voting for people to get into power?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I get asked, should we have proportional representation? That's a form of politics where you vote for a first, second, and third candidate, so it's much more proportional. That's possible, but you end up getting no real certainty with which party it's going to be. When we had the coalition back in 2010 with the Liberals, that didn't necessarily bring the country together because lots of people voted Liberal and Conservative. I think there's an issue around tribal politics where somebody's in a town for too long and can't be scrutinised. But I think it's the job of everyone. I don't think you could say there's one aspect of politics that fixes everything for everyone. It's a different problem in each town. You know, Stuart Bell wasn't doing the job he should have been doing. The local newspapers did kind of report things at the time when it was happening over 30 years. But because nationally nothing got picked up by national media, he just kind of kept doing it. Had he been an MP in London and did that, he would have been noticed by London media and so on. So I think it's less to do with politics as a machine not working, but as a society, how we look and report on politics. So in London, we'd hear about London MPs and about some big national issues, but we wouldn't hear what's happening in Wales or local MPs in the Northeast. I'd never heard of Sir Stuart Bell, and he'd been in there 30 years and he had a knighthood. So, and I watch a lot of news and politics. So I think we need to be immersed more, and I think we need to have more involvement. So, you know, films like this and other films like it, I think would be potentially the answer. But I don't think we can think about it once every 5 years, because when that happens, people think of who the Prime Minister could be. Are you voting for Jeremy Corbyn or are you voting for Boris Johnson? You're voting for neither, because you have a local MP in Middlesbrough, Stuart Bell or whoever. That's who you're really voting for. And that's the person who'll be going to Parliament, hopefully, and asking for extra funding for the area or for special tax breaks and so on. So it really is, get to know your local MP, regardless of which party they're in, and see if they're effective, and if they're not, how you can help get one who is.
Brilliant answer. Again, what's this kind of a good segue? We know our local MP's he's a Liberal Democrat candidate, actually, Jamie Stone. But if taking your experience from this filmmaking, working behind the scenes, as you did with the Labour Party, as you were producing that documentary, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting, trying to become an MP for their constituency?
Well, choose your party, you know, and choose it well, because once you do become a candidate for one of the other parties, it's unlikely then you could switch sides and become a candidate later on. It does happen, but it makes things harder. And maybe get involved in local council and be involved with the council as well. I mean, national politics has some similarities, but it's a very different game. Not many people from council end up becoming members of parliament, but you don't always have to be a member of parliament. You could be a parliamentary researcher. You could work in the House of Commons. There's different schemes and jobs. So sometimes it might be worth doing that. You know, it might be more interesting being a chief of staff to a minister than it would be being the minister themselves. And we think recently Dominic Cummings, has been talked about a lot recently. He has quite an essential role there, but all prime ministers, chiefs of staff do. You know, they're probably the next most important person next to a prime minister, whether it's Alistair Campbell and other people in previous administrations. And if you see dramas about the West Wing in America and the White House, it's the chief of staff who the president really will speak to first, not the vice president. So between the president or the prime minister in this case and the chief of staff, that's where a lot of the interesting policy decisions are made. How then to deliver that message or spin that message, as it's sometimes skeptically called. So you don't always have to be an elected official. You can actually work in politics and still see all the machinery up close by being a researcher.
Brilliant. And again, I think the news that Dominic Cummings brought over the last couple of weeks and months has kind of shone a light on, I guess, the importance of the inner workings of politics. Again, you've got this idea before starting a course like this or before becoming a bit more involved in politics that it's all made by one person in charge. But as you say, there's such a localised impact to it and the people behind the scenes. So that was really good.
Thank you. Do I get 10 out of 10, sir?
I would say so. So far, these are A-star material.
Excellent. Do people still call teachers sir? I don't know. It tells you how old I am.
We do get called that up in the Highlands, which I must admit I found really strange to start with. The last school I was at, which was in Moray, in between Aberdeenshire and the Highlands, and it was just Mr. Moir you get called. So when I moved into the Highlands, I got called sir. It's maybe I think it was in the House of Lords or something.
Cool. I'm just going to switch on a fan here because the office is getting. I hope this doesn't affect the sound too much.
Oh no, I hope I'm not making you sweat with the
you are
making these questions.
Under pressure. No, it's 33 degrees here in London today, so don't. I'm not showing off. I'm not a sun worshipper. I mean, look at how pale I am. The sun and me do not get on. Sunshine is my destroyer. As it's a famous quote from a film from 1985.
You're making us all jealous here. Up in the Highlands, we better able to get the sun to that degree.
I'm living in the wrong place. I should be living in the Highlands for sure.
Well, if you want to run for our local MP up here, I'm sure they'd be willing to take you. Have you had a chance to? I love the wee background change there.
The animations helped. You know, it's part of the reason. One of the reasons people could access the film are through these 1950s style public information film animations. And look at cute little me up there, like, on top of the world.
I think I'd struggle not to use that everywhere I went. That's a sticker of me up and everything. Have you had a chance to return to Middlesbrough since the election campaign and maybe catch up with some of the people that you met during that campaign, or again just speak to people and see if things have got better for them?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I caught up with people a year afterwards. I went back where the film was screened and caught up with a lot of people involved. And I regularly stay in touch even now. You know, we swap Christmas cards and I stay in touch. Sadly, some of the people from the film, like Hazel Pearson, who was the leading member of the Conservative Council, she's no longer with us. And Sir Stuart Bell has passed as well. But no, I do try and keep in touch with people. It's difficult for them because so much hope and excitement, and in a way, had my film come out during the election, if you could have somehow time traveled and said to people, look at the film, and shown it, maybe I would have been the Conservative candidate for Middlesbrough. And the people there really liked me and I liked them. So it was quite a symbiotic relationship. They had all the local knowledge, I had none. I'm the bloke from the telly who can do smart things on video, and that's a skill set they didn't have. So it was quite a comfortable situation. It wasn't like a rival thing. I wasn't on the council with you and think that I've been in the town longer, therefore have more of a right to have an opinion. They really embraced having the outsider as a candidate. And no, so I'm still in touch, so it's good.
Good. And if you had a chance to do one of the flash mobs yet? I
remember
watching.
I had to explain what flash mob was to a tiny group of people at show. And can you tell me, young man, what is a flash mob? So it's like, okay, right. It wasn't to mock anyone, because if anything, no one comes out of that film well. But it was just to look at the kind of disconnect between politics as it lands like an alien with a spaceship to ask people to do something in this brief 6-week period of campaigning, and then it shoots off and comes back 5 years later. It's so out of step with how people are, and yet there isn't funding to be campaigning for 5 years. You know, there's an argument to say, should it be funded centrally out of the tax from the taxpayer? And yes, that would stop anyone from using the money in a way that's advantageous. So by giving a big grant to one of the parties, they then give you a favor when they're in office. But there are better things perhaps to be spending the money on, regardless of what's happened recently in the world. Even before then, there are issues with roads and schools and meals for children and so on. So I think funding politics out of a centralized tax pot is not a good idea, but I've yet to hear a definitive one that makes it a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Next question. What was the most frustrating part of the campaign for you? Some of these questions are really good. I'm really interested to hear your answers.
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, frustrating. Well, I lost my temper over the leaflets issue. There was that whole debacle about the Conservatives got the, was it the wrong templates or something? But it would have meant that the election dress wouldn't go out. And it was a problem from central office. They'd sent out the wrong design template into which you would drop all of your information as a candidate. And I mean, we were doing so much up there and I was funding it out of my own pocket. It's kind of like, well, they wouldn't have found anyone else to have spent that much money. I was thinking it was about £16,000 out of my own pocket, or it's 15,000 out of my own pocket to just to fund the campaign. That's even before the cost of making the film. And it's just kind of like, you're just left to swing. And I recognized, because I wasn't expected to win, that's why there wasn't that much oversight. But if this was a training ground and I was then going to go on to another seat, because this is the plan for candidates like me, you're in a seat you can't win as a test, but then when you're in a target seat like Paul Bristow and you step up a bit, but what you're disincentivized by the party being so disorganized, and the Labour Party and the Liberals are even worse organized than that. So again, it's easy to criticize from a distance because I don't know what pressures they had. There's over 600 constituencies, so there'll be 600 candidates all asking for similar things. But I think to get the template right for that election address leaflet is very important. And I think that's a mistake that hopefully they've addressed now. But it's the kind of thing in the film that just makes you feel like, well, what are we doing up here? You know, if they're just going to leave you. And if it wasn't delivered by the post office, we would have to have delivered it to every letterbox in the town. There was tens of thousands of letterboxes. It just wasn't possible or practical or doable. And it's kind of like, well, don't you care about the election? Because, you know, and it wasn't just my leaflet that was in this position. It was the same template they sent out to all candidates. So it was quite the to-do. And the scrambled eggs, I don't know what happened to them. They hit the wall. And John was worried about telling me, because John knows I have a short fuse, and because he worked with me a lot in TV. And so he was like, he was trying to give me what's called a news sandwich. So a bit of good news, a bit of bad news, and a bit of good news. And I was like, just tell me. I could tell from his face that something was up, but he wanted to make sure I didn't blame him, and I didn't. You know, he was working to the best of his ability.
Oh, it's like you say, it's just the little things, that wee bit of support from a party to make sure that you get the simple thing like the leaflet to go out on time.
Yes, much to ask, is it?
I know. You'd think it would be the easiest thing.
Yeah.
And it came across as well when you'd phoned up to the post office.
That's right,
saying that there was an issue, and they were like, "Oh, you just have to deliver it yourself."
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's just. No, it seems crazy now when you think back about it, but no, it's incredible, really. It's incredible.
I'm not sure the band of merry men and the battle jeep would have managed to get through the entire city of Middlesbrough.
No, exactly, yeah.
Are you still a member of the Conservative Party, or are you less active than you once were?
Look, I've changed the background again, trying to dissuade everyone from what I said. No, I'm no longer a member of the Conservative Party. I mean, that's not I'm not making a statement by saying that. I was while I was a candidate, because you had to be whilst being a candidate. When I was no longer a candidate, and I'm not on the candidates list, then the Conservative membership lapsed as well. Now I try and keep a kind of a fairly neutral view with what I do. The film kind of separated me from the political side of things. So we kind of got good quotes there from a lot of the main parties, a lot of the main newspapers and so on. So it was seen as a non-partisan piece when it was finished. And so I see myself as a non-partisan person now. So I don't, as much as I am ToryBoy from ToryBoy The Movie, I'm guilty of that. That was then. And I wouldn't stand as a candidate for Labour. So I wouldn't go back. So that's certainly the case. I don't think I'll be voting Labour anytime soon. Sorry, Keir Starmer.
I'm sure he's got a little bit of work to do there, maybe.
Yep.
But I guess it's a really really good to hear that from you, because we've recently been talking in the class, or online, should I say, rather than in the classroom, about political participation and why people join a party. And there seems to be a lot of people join a party after an election defeat. Lib Dems and Labour had that spike in party membership, rising immediately after terrible election results. Could anything like that draw you back into politics, or do you see yourself more as someone that would support just the right decisions and the right policies going forward?
I think now the landscape is changing, that less support for parties, but more support for issues. So if we've seen with like Black Lives Matter, that's a very specific issue that affects people in a very specific way. So I think more people are getting politically engaged on single issues, then looking to the big parties and say, what are you doing about this? And of course, all the parties have a take then on it. I think there's probably more to be achieved by being involved in a smaller political movement, whether it's a pressure group, as they used to call them. And I think Black Lives Matter would be considered a traditional, in some ways, political pressure group. They're organised, they have an agenda, if you like, they have a policy they like to put forward, and they've done it in a clear and effective way. And, you know, the perception is they have rights behind them. And, I'm a big believer in Black Lives Matter. So I can see myself getting engaged in a political a sort of aspect, a splinter, as it were, but not the party. I'm not that interested in the machinery. I feel like I've done that. Unless the machinery changed differently, or Kim Jong-un in North Korea said he likes my haircut, and I'll be like, oh, that's not really a compliment. And like your film, I'll be like, yeah, that's all right. I'll have that, take that. And come and film here in North Korea, I'd be like, yes, indeed. I'll be straight over there, because I'd be fascinated to see how the mechanics of that works, because that's a mystery to the world. You know, to what extent did China pull the strings in North Korea, or is it the other way around? You know, North Korea is fascinating. So I'd be more interested in going there and filming with him, or President Xi in China. That would be fascinating, because there's so little we know about it.
Yeah, I mean that could be ToryBoy the Movie Part 2.
Yeah,
you know, when
Tory
about Rocky earlier on.
That's it. When ToryBoy meets Rocket Man.
Exactly. There's definitely a film in there somewhere.
Yeah.
I can send Kim Jong-un an email if you want.
Well, I'll bring you with me. You could be my replacement, John. So you could come along and do some interesting video diaries about the experience.
That sounds brilliant. I'll get the haircut. I'll shave and everything for the occasion.
Excellent.
I guess one of the things I want to finish on is, or there's two more questions. First one, you were saying that Boris Johnson became a bit of a fan of yours and asked you to come back in 2015. Do you still have any contact with Boris Johnson, and would there be any sort of work that you could do, I don't know, TV-wise, looking at Brexit and how all that goes along, or is there any plans there?
No, the letter was because he was Mayor of London and he got a copy of the DVD. It was on DVD, and that was the poster for cinemas. It was similar DVD cover. He really liked it, and I think he saw the clarity of the message and felt that, oh, no one else has done anything like this. I was amazed nobody else had done this. I was like, either this is a rubbish idea, it's not worth doing, or it's a really good idea. Why hasn't anyone done this? And it was a really good idea. Why hasn't anyone done this? Obviously, clearly. I was motivated. I think if I was sent up there to do it, and it was like the editor of the newspaper said, right, go up there and do this job, and I'd be like, right. But I was really motivated, so that comes through. Anything you really want to do a good job on shines through. And all of my other work on my website is all very different to this and different from each other. But the one thing it has in common is I'm motivated. I'm not in touch with Boris Johnson or any of the Number 10 people. If they asked me, though, I would come down and offer that advice. You know, I know about delivering a message. I know about perceptions of messages, and I would be an asset to the Number 10 team. And that sounds an incredibly arrogant thing to say, but I just know I would. I wouldn't be an asset to a rowing team, particularly, because why would I be? I mean, I work out in the gym, but I just know where your strengths lie, and my strengths would lie well with being part of the voice at Number 10. And yes, I would work with Boris Johnson. I like him. I like what he's doing. And, you know, whether you agree with his politics or not, he literally put his life on the line, becoming prime minister. What he went through a lot of personal struggles with that. And he's financially independent. He doesn't need the job, as it were. He's not doing the job for the money. He's not doing it for his ego. He's doing it because he likes politics. He's drawn to it. So people who are drawn to football and play football professionally, often when they stop, they still play football, because guess what? They like it and they're drawn to that sport. And this just happens to be what Boris is drawn to. I think that's why he's so effective, because if you really like something and it's not a job for you and it's not a drudgery, and you've not just been the constituency MP for 30 years, so you have to kind of stick with it, you have nothing else. I think that always shines through. And the takeaway from today should be, if you really want something, get good at it. But more than being good at something, it's persistence and hard work.
100%. And the old saying is, if you enjoy what you're doing, you don't work a day in your life, or something like that. And I think that rings true. You obviously really enjoy the things that you do, and being able to unpackage things, show how things work, and be able to present it to us guys. I really enjoy being able to stand in front of a classroom and get mocked mercilessly for whatever stupid thing I've said. But yeah, I think that's a really good message. And I guess the last question to finish on from the students is, what does the future hold for John Walsh?
Well, look, since ToryBoy, that was 2010. So that's like 10 years ago this year. So a year later, it went on to DVD. It got a cinema release in 2015 again, and it's about to go on to Amazon Prime. So there's money to be made out of these stories. And because I financed the film myself, unlike other films I've made with television, where I'm only part sharer of the profits on that, all the profits of ToryBoy go back to me, and none to the Conservative Party, just to me. In that time, I've had a previous film that I made back in 1996 called Monarch, remastered in HD and release about the death of Henry VIII. I've kept up with my television work, and I've become a writer unexpectedly. I'm a trustee of a film charity called the Ray Harryhausen Foundation. The Ray Harryhausen made monster movies like Jason and the Argonauts, Clash of the Titans. I met him when I was a teenager, when I was very young, and I'm not being rude, Neil. I'm going to try and find a picture of me with Ray Harryhausen so I can show you class.
It sounds brilliant.
And I became a trustee of his foundation. So I made a documentary about his life and work. And now I'm a part of that. So I made oh gosh, it's always the way, isn't it? You can never find the pictures when you want to find them. So I made a book called Harryhausen, The Lost Movies, which was all about the unmade films of Ray Harryhausen. And I'm not sure if you've seen any of that, Neil. Have you seen any of that online?
I have seen you sharing the book and all the sort of promotional materials from that, which again is brilliant to see. And I always wondered if that was sort of one of your biggest inspirations for the career that you've had, that meeting a Ray Harryhausen and getting to work with him at such a young age.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, it's I always wanted to work with Ray Harryhausen, and I always felt that, you know, they were the sorts of films that I would love to have been involved with. Here we go now. I've actually found some pictures. So,
brilliant.
So, look, I look like I'm auditioning for Depeche Mode, a group from the 80s. So I'm even paler there. How's that even possible? I wasn't a vampire, I can assure you. So there's Ray Harryhausen, who's a Hollywood filmmaker. There's the Kraken from the film Clash of the Titans. And so when I met Ray, I made a documentary about his life and work, and you can see clips of that on my website. And I've written a book about his unmade films. That book was so successful, the publisher, Tyson Books, said, let's do another one. And it only came out in September last year, and it's already gone to a second print run. So I agreed with them last year about doing a new book, and I've just written Flash Gordon, the official story of the film. And it's based on the film from 40 years ago that has the Queen soundtrack on it, Flash, you know, that song, Flash, ah. And that book is finished now. It's out in October. And I'm busy sort of working on a potential third book. So in lockdown, I've been working with the publisher on agreeing a third book. So all of these things spring from my interest in filmmaking, and all of the things that kind of inspire me and get me up in the morning, because I think the most difficult thing is doing something which you feel that it's got a sense of, if you have to get up at 5 in the morning or go to bed at midnight, what's going to be the thing that will get you out of bed? You know, for some people it is football or it's sports, and for me it just happens to be a certain type of science fiction or monster movie. So I'm busy looking for more pictures now. I'm incredibly rude, not looking you straight in the face there, see if I can find anything else I can pop on here. So
no, I know for a fact I'd be delighted to see all your workings. And
there's the cover of the book. The book isn't quite that big, but it is large. It's a large format, sort of coffee table book like this. And I go around the world now giving talks on the subjects of this and the unmade films. Just to put him into context, when Ray Harryhausen died in 2013, George Lucas said there would likely have been no Star Wars without Ray Harryhausen. And George Lucas, of course, is the original maker of the original Star Wars films. So Star Wars, the Marvel Universe, all of that owes a lot to these creature features that were made by Ray Harryhausen. They're regularly on TV as we speak. Big audience for these books. Nobody thought of doing it. I even spoke to Ray and said, you know, what about doing a book about your lost movies, your unmade films? And he said, well, no one's going to want to know. And I said, well, I want to know, and I'd buy that book. And I'm pretty sure other people would too. And the publisher agreed, and now it's been a big success. And the story of Flash Gordon, you know, that's one that people want to know about because the film is still popular. So, you know, there is always ways to find income, you know, because the other things I'd say to young people, particularly film students who ask me how I've become successful, is these are two harsh realities. The first is that it's very hard to be paid to do something creative. It's even harder to receive a salary regularly to do something creative. And it's basically unheard of to become financially independent from doing something creative. And you're all screaming now, well, what the bloody hell, what about this and what about, yes, I know there are examples, but for every J.K. Rowling and Neil's favourite, Jeffrey Archer, there's going to be thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who have submitted manuscripts to publishers or people who've tried to get recording contracts and so on. And there's only a short window of popularity. You know, you can't always be a successful singer and writer and so on. And even within television, there's a kind of a life span to your success. But find something you're passionate about and try and stick with it. There is ways to make money from being creative and doing what you want. And as Neil said, if you are doing something you like, then you never feel you're at work. And I've always done programs I've wanted to make, and I've never felt like I've been at work.
Brilliant. And is there any sort of TV and movies in a pipeline that we can all eagerly wait for?
And well, funny enough, in terms of movies, the unmade sequel to Clash of the Titans that should have come out in 1984 was called Force of the Trojans. And I've been developing that screenplay for the last couple of years. And for television, I'm working on a couple of documentary ideas, funnily enough, around missing, presumed lost items, but more to do with the domestic personal nature. So it is a whole fascinating tap and unwrap of stories that have been kept secrets for reasons of privacy, such as ToryBoy and Stuart Bell, or stories that have been maybe forgotten in the sands of time. So I'm digging through those sands and saying to people, look, isn't this worth reassessing? Isn't this worth looking again? So it's a form of history, but I don't like to use the word history because it gets a bad rap when people have a negative experience at school. You think, don't do history. But this is a historical book about films that weren't made. It's like, oh, I don't want to read that. Imagine if that was the cover. Historical films that were never made. No, straight to Poundland.
No, I'm sure you'd do a lot better than Poundland, but I guess again that speaks about the power of marketing and how you package something. And as you say, the lost movies makes it sound like hidden treasure to be found there, doesn't it?
Yes, indeed, and it was. You know, Ray Harryhausen was an innovator. He was a great artist, and the films that he didn't make, I mean, it's shocking. You know, they're beautiful artwork, and maybe some of them will see the light of day now. Fingers
crossed. But thank you very much, John, for taking your time and sitting down and talking everything about ToryBoy the movie. Hopefully the questions there allowed you to kind of say everything you wanted to say in the aftermath. And I know looking at the reviews that I got from the class, how much they enjoyed it and how much they enjoyed seeing you give us that insight into politics, and be absolutely delighted to watch whatever else that you've got in the pipeline.
Happy to keep in touch. Brilliant.
Is there anything that you'd like to say before we sign off, or is there anything that I didn't get a chance to ask you?
Well, just a kind of a general note, I would like to have found this out when I was a student. I went to a Catholic boys' school in South London, and I got no advice on how to get to film school. And I went to film school in the end, the London Film School, quite a prestigious one. That picture you saw of me when I looked incredibly young, I was 18, and it's a post-grad course, so everyone else was in their mid-20s. I realised at film school that you can literally make a film for zero money, and you can do it now on your phone, of course. But if you have an interesting story, go and film it. You don't need permission from TV to make a documentary. You can upload stuff, of course, to YouTube and so on. And it can become your calling card. And I think, you know, being a filmmaker now has been democratized by technology. And I think it's, you know, once you're not putting yourself in harm's way, I think it's worth getting under the skin of subjects that people have tried to keep suppressed and give it a go. You know, I've done it and had a very successful life doing it. So have a look at my websites for an idea of the types of films and programs that might be right under your nose.
Brilliant. I'm going to go film some historical documentaries and see if I can crack into TV as well.
Excellent, Neil. Well, you have a great day, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, John. It's much appreciated.